Waiting for more eggs.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ashley Limbers, the marketing lead here at Encompass Solutions, and it's a pleasure to be your guide today through this roundtable discussion. Joining us today are a knowledgeable group of panelists, each bringing a wealth of experience in navigating the intricacies of retail manufacturing industry. Please welcome Tanya Sweet, EDI Sales and Consulting at Encompass Solutions, Jason Claggett, Director of Operations and Advanced Support at Encompass Solutions, and Brian Finks, Strategic Sales Manager at SPS Commerce. In addition to our in-house expertise, we're honored to have our EDI partner, SPS Commerce, on the panel. SPS has been a driving force in revolutionizing businesses nationwide with its cloud-based EDI and supply chain solution. And of course, we're grateful to our host for making this event possible. For those new to Encompass Solutions, let me take a moment to introduce our company. As an Epicor Premier Partner for ERP and EDI solutions, we're dedicated to empowering manufacturing businesses to enhance operational efficiency, streamline data integration, and optimize supply chain processes. Thank you for being here with us today. Your insights are invaluable. Before we dive into our discussion, let's remember why we're all gathered here. Black Friday is like the Olympics for retail, and EDI is our gold medal. Today, we're here to uncover the secrets to orchestrating a sales season with precision. But hey, it's not all about us talking at you. We're eager to hear from you too. Drop your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many of them as possible during our Q&A session. Today's event is being recorded, and you'll receive a copy via email. There is also a survey for you to complete at the end for your valuable feedback. Now let's dive into the heart of the matter. Our panelists are prepared with insights and practical advice to help you navigate Black Friday. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to start with general EDI manufacturing readiness for Black Friday. So Brian, with SPS, what are some common challenges manufacturers face when dealing with increased order volume, and data entry errors during Black Friday, and how can EDI help mitigate these issues?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ashley. Excited to be a part of the talk here today. I think it sort of comes down to it being a little bit of a shock to some businesses when they see success, order volume spiking, and there's a couple different approaches for handling that. Some, look at it and say, geez, I'm going to flex up a lot of my resources, reallocate people internally to, maybe process EDI orders by hand, hire on, temp workers to solve for that, or maybe look at an alternative like implementing more of an integrated solution. So there's a couple of different ways to kind of handle that. I think the biggest sort of challenge tied to that is oftentimes the time spent and the dollars associated with the time spent on that for your own resources to do things by hand. So some companies view EDI as kind of a compliance, or they look down on it. They don't like doing it. It's a thorn in their side, but not realizing that, geez, it is a compliance thing, but you can also make it a business benefit by automating processes, plugging in with obviously your team to make that a much better process for their team internally. So that solves for kind of the volume, the data entry error side of things, just eliminating the hand touch aspect of it. Because it's not just the orders that are coming in. There's, when you have an increase, tenfold on orders, you have all those return documents as well. So getting the correct ASNs out, the invoicing, if those POs have a lot of lines on them as well, that just makes it that much harder. I'm sure Jason and Tanya could speak to that too. And knowing the difference between a 1 line item order versus a 10 line item order can have a huge impact for the business. So a couple of things there. I think looking at some specific buying organizations, they have different, expectations for scorecarding or chargebacks tied to that as well. So if you're doing EDI in a little more of a manual fashion and you have a huge increase in order volume, suddenly, you need to be able to do your PO acknowledgments for Amazon, for example, within a really set, quick time frame. Otherwise, they'll ding you with a chargeback. So just being aware of some of those relationships as well, and having the ability to get around that or to get ahead of it is a big one. I think you know, another part of it, at least what we've seen on the SPS side, is the Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I mean, honestly, just across the business all year is moving from a lot of the traditional sort of ship in bulk to DC type orders and shifting more towards drop ship. And we typically see those are going to be lower dollar value orders with a higher labor cost internally, because you're putting the same amount of time into an order that is maybe only worth $10 instead of $10,000. So just kind of being cognizant of some of those things can be a huge win for a business to get ahead of a little bit.
That's
Well,
great.
and don't you think, oh, sorry, Ashley.
Okay.
Don't
Go
you
ahead,
think,
Tanya.
Brian, that specifically over Black Friday and Cyber Monday, the drop ships increased tremendously?
They do, and yeah, and the SPS. I mean, we pulled data. I forget what the numbers were for this last year, but I know historically we've pulled data and just see our network spike in terms of that dropship volume. That was actually
I
one
know the
thing
number because I wrote it down. Again, I'm talking over you, sorry. It's 59% of an increase in drop ships over that Black Friday to Cyber Monday. Well, probably the entire holiday season. 59% are now drop ships that weren't before. That's crazy.
You wrote it down. I didn't.
Sorry.
The other thing to that point too is looking at what challenges come up specific to those volume spikes, and how can EDI mitigate that. An increase in a really large increase in dropship orders we've seen sometimes can slow down other EDI systems, or lower support level services, to where they're not getting their orders because they get flooded with so many that systems start to freeze up. So just getting ahead of that by having the right kind of infrastructure around it to not have a catastrophic issue on your busiest day of the year, would ring true as well.
Absolutely.
That's great. Tanya, could you share a real life example of a manufacturer that has successfully implemented an EDI solution before the holiday season and the impact it had on their operations?
Yeah, we had a customer that realized their vast majority of their business was over the holiday season. And so they actually did manage to get in front of the whole EDI story and get that almost completely done before Black Friday. But then they realized that they didn't have the staff to manage it afterward. And so they came to us and they said, is there anything you can do? And of course, we were more than happy to come in, and Jason's team specifically jumped right in, and we really just managed their EDI for a set period of time. We knew it was going to be, I think it was 3 months, if I remember right, that we were just going to take care of their EDI so they could really focus on everything else. And so we did that for them. I don't know if Jason, you have more to add on that one. But...
yeah, so they realized that they had all the solutions in place, but they didn't have the team to kind of keep up with the behind the scenes managing it. And they asked us if we had a solution, and we had we have an EDI advanced support program specifically designed for situations like this. So even if it's temporary, like staff augmentation, you need to ramp up for a busy part of your season, whether it's if you're a seasonal business, or if you're heading into Black Friday or Cyber Monday and you just need extra support to help navigate those, we can definitely help you. And we'll talk more about that, I think, towards the end of the webinar, but it's a good teaser.
That's great. Thanks for adding into that. Let's move over to some benefits and advantages of EDI for manufacturers. Tanya, going back to you, and what specific ways does EDI streamline order processing, inventory management, and supply chain coordination for manufacturers in preparation for Black Friday sales?
Absolutely. So the same things that we talk about in every why we do EDI, right? Automation. People are not having to sit at their keyboards and type. We take that completely out of the picture, and people are sitting at their keyboards and making sure everything is moving, or they're out in the warehouse shipping and they're doing things that are not as busy work for them, especially with this high increase in drop ships, right? What used to be one order could now be 15. And the time to enter that is of course compounded when you do that. And so taking that into consideration, the automation is very big, and especially over the holidays when people don't want to work more, necessarily, right? They also would like to be out shopping. So just being able to free up people. And then accuracy, again, when we're doing high volumes, our accuracy is going to go down. That's just the way it is. And then the other area that we've seen a lot of growth in recently is working with 3PLs and warehousing, automating that piece so that there is not literally an email being written that says, hey, could you ship these part numbers to this address and then let us know when you did it, right? Automating all of those steps is going to make your inventory more accurate, more timely. You're going to have just better coordination, and your suppliers are going to be happier because you're able to meet the demands, really.
Tanya, I'd add to that too. It's not just if someone's on vacation, but I am like having flashbacks to early COVID when, we had customers that maybe used SPS for one or two of their trading relationships, but they had 5 other portals with 5 customer service, representatives that knew each of those portals. Suddenly nobody's in the office and nothing's getting done. And, it's nice to have a sort of a single,
Yes.
process that's not different for every customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Brian, how can you talk about how EDI contributes to, and expanding on what Tanya was saying, enhancing accuracy and lead time, how it reduces lead time, allowing manufacturers to meet the demands of the Black Friday shoppers effectively?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some of what Tanya had mentioned sort of speaks to this as well. It's just, automating the process leads to faster processing. That's going to have product on the shelves quicker. Implementing EDI and having that automated solution in place likely is going to allow customers or users of EDI to be paid faster by their customers as well. Getting a little more preferential treatment over, someone doing things manually. We actually see, EDI is often, if someone's doing it in a less than ideal way or doing things more manually, that process can be a bottleneck for sales, limiting growth. So implementing these types of automations frees up that bandwidth so that, sales can go out there and do their job and not have to worry about, setups or things like that, limiting their ability to grow the relationship. I think lastly too, something that I wasn't aware of until a couple of years ago was we actually, at SPS, we have teams that work we work with both suppliers or sellers of goods as well as the buying organizations. And we've gone out to, the distribution centers with some of the really large retailers, and they'll show us, walking through, we'd be like, hey, what's this pile of stuff over here in kind of essentially no man's land? And it's in the receiving department for, pallets of goods that didn't come in or that came in with no ASN or an advanced ship notice. So those products that don't have that EDI transactions, that allows them to scan it in the warehouse and say, okay, this is what it is. It's where it needs to go. If it doesn't have that, it gets pushed off to the side when they're during peak season. And the stuff that's documented correctly goes right to the shelves. Whenever somebody has a free minute, they, sometimes come back and then sort through kind of the pile that, is sitting there. So it can be a competitive advantage to implement, just the basic EDI transactions, but then also, providing additional detail as well.
And just adding to that, right? Sometimes they just reject your shipment, right? So you've spent all this time just packing it up, getting it all out to them in time, and they didn't get the ASN, they just reject it. There's a number of people, and then it affects your scorecard. Your supplier's not happy with you, right? It kind of snowballs from there.
Sounds like a Black Friday nightmare.
And that,
I think that, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, Tanya, that's like probably my point I would wrap that up with is you want to be, a supplier or vendor that your buyer wants to work with, right? You don't want to be the most difficult one. You're gonna have a much better,
Yes.
success being someone that buyers want to buy from.
That's great. One point that we haven't touched on, Jason, can you highlight some, and Tanya as well, can you highlight on some cost saving benefits that manufacturers can achieve by integrating EDI in their operations, especially when handling the surge in Black Friday orders?
Sure. Well, I think we've touched on a few of the things like accuracy and just some of the just the overall efficiencies you get by integrating, software packages and in allowing the back end, systems, ERP systems to do their job, and you work at a manage by exception versus manage everything at once. So you can, benefit by, knowing the stuff's getting out, knowing that the automation you've put in place is there, and then just managing the exceptions as they come in. Maybe somebody, forgot to put a PO number in there, or forgot one item of information when they were entering the shipping information. And so managing those exceptions is a lot easier than managing every piece of data that goes out the door. And that's kind of where I see it. And I guess I'll turn it over to Tanya to give her thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's the same things we've talked about, right? Accuracy, speed. But additionally, if you're getting your invoices out on time, right, you're probably getting your payments back on time as well. If you send an invoice 2 weeks late, your terms didn't start for 2 weeks, right? So that can delay things too. So like literal cash flow can be increased. So you've got more working capital to work with for whatever's next. Excuse me. And then, of course, there's some, and this is hard to quantify, right? But a little bit happier employees counts for something. They're not sitting with a pile of, they're not going home at the end of the day going, I didn't get all my orders entered in today. So there's some cost savings there too.
Excellent points. All right, let's move over to EDI implementation challenges and some best practices. So Brian, over to you. Implementing EDI can be a complex process. What are some key challenges manufacturers might face when integrating EDI into their systems, especially when time is of the essence before the holidays?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I think the biggest thing I could, voice here is, EDI is implemented and developed to be a standard and something that everybody can, agree upon and do. But today, EDI, it's anything but standard. Every different buying organization has their own rule book. I think I've seen, a hard copy of Target's, order rule book, for example, and it's like 1,000 pages long or something. So every buying organization has a different rule, different expectations. So just realizing that you're going to need to be able to understand that, or partner with, a provider that handles that for you. The other big thing, I guess, tied specifically to, the holiday season coming up is a lot of the retailers and the buying orgs, they actually do code freezes leading into the busiest part of the season. They don't want to be, doing open heart surgery, for example, on their systems, adding new, setups or new customers or suppliers, when they're just trying to get through the day and make sure all their orders get out and customers get the product. And brand loyalty is such a big thing. They want to keep those customers happy. So we like to get ahead of that a little bit and let our customers know, like, hey, SPS, we're going to be having a code freeze, on these dates here coming up towards, I think, around Thanksgiving. And it's dictated by the buying organization. So just being aware of that. If there's a new customer that somebody needs to onboard, maybe do that a couple weeks early, this time of year, as opposed to waiting for the last second. Can be a huge win, because if it's a highly seasonal business, you don't want to miss that that peak couple of days there. And I guess lastly on that too, implementing a solution that gives you flexibility for options for setting up as well is really important. Again, I obviously with the Encompass team and leveraging the Entrust tool, have that integration in place. But, it's not something that's set up, in one day. So if sales does land a new customer and says, hey, I need to get, we need to be EDI compliant tomorrow, having an option for a really quick interim solution is important as well. So just kind of understanding what that could look like with, providers too. And with SPS, yeah, we have our web-based fulfillment tool that always runs in tandem to our integrations that really allows customers to do that. So
great, those are great points. Tanya, Are there any best practices or strategies that manufacturers should consider when planning and executing an EDI implementation to ensure a smooth transition during the holiday season?
Yes. Some key things would be to be realistic, right? Can you actually pull this off? And not just being dreamers who are like, yeah, of course we can pull it off, right? What resources do you really have to pull it off? And then not taking shortcuts, right? You still need a project plan. You still need to follow a project plan. You can't just slam it in and hope for the best. Make sure you're still doing all of the things. You just need to do them faster, but they still need to be done. And this is what I preach is testing. Do not skip testing. Do all the testing. Make sure you're testing all the scenarios. Get a good assortment of scenarios because you're going to miss that one. For example, excuse me, drop ships, right? How many drop ships have you done so far this year? Do you know your system can accommodate them, right? Suddenly we get 500 drop ships and we haven't really tested drop ships. We could be in a pickle. So don't just skip over the testing and make sure you're capturing all those scenarios. Another thing that, sorry, did someone want to talk?
Go ahead, Tanya.
I
was going to add, but you were finished, so go ahead.
It's all right. Also involve your end users. Sometimes the IT team's like, all right, we've got EDI, let's do this. And they do all the testing. And then when it gets to the end users who are actually using it, they're like, well, but I'm missing this data. Or how come I don't see this? Or where am I going to find this? How do I resend this? So don't skip the end users because it's time critical. And then, of course, don't rush. I mean, there's some rush, but that doesn't mean quality should suffer. Make sure that your quality is still at the highest level possible in the speed in the speed zone, I guess. Go ahead, Jason.
And I would add, and I know, Tanya, you're the expert on the EDI implementations, but I've seen just in practice with general implementations I've worked with is timeliness in reporting issues and challenges, because if you wait to report those, a lot of times we or your implementation partner won't be able to act fast enough to fix those. So as soon as you see any issues, be sure to raise those as soon as possible, especially if you're trying to hit the peak season.
Right, and what can be helpful in that is if we don't know the issue exists, of course we can't fix it. But somebody might be in your system fixing something else, and they could have just quickly fixed that, but they didn't know about it. So now it takes another day or however long to get that resolved. And that's a really, really good point, is report those issues. I tend to be like, I'll deal with that later, when it was probably important enough to deal with it on the first try instead of I'll deal with that later.
Great, thank you both. So we've covered the benefits and advantages and whatever some challenges and best practices. Let's move into choosing the right EDI solution. So Brian, this is to you. What criteria should manufacturers use when selecting an external EDI provider or partner, especially when they need assistance in preparing for Black Friday or other peak time sales?
Got it. Yeah. I think the first question that, or sort of thing I like to throw out there when, looking at what makes a good solution or what's the right solution is just recognizing, acknowledging that, hey, EDI, a lot of companies think it's sort of a one-time IT project, but it really is more than that. It's a living, breathing, constantly changing beast that sort of needs to be tamed. It's funny you're talking about the testing process. Everyone loves going through testing, but that's just the beginning, right? That's the first step. And then, 6 months down the road, a buyer might change a requirement and need an update or something. So it's something that's always changing and needs to be maintained. So, what I like to tell customers or prospective customers is just flat out ask, is EDI something that you want to own and maintain internally? Do you view that as a core competency of your business where you want to hire on the resources to be that expert? Or you want to partner with a full service, provider like SPS, where we basically take that on their behalf, so they don't have to do that. Because again, it's more than going through a one-time evaluation to buy a piece of technology and then sort of be hands off and it's done. It's an ongoing engagement. So things to consider on that is sort of to Tanya's point, who's doing that trading partner testing when it's initially set up. Who's bringing to the table sort of the expertise of understanding what different preferences are for those buying organizations. So, what their testing requirements are, what their connectivity preferences are, whether it's a AS2, a VAN, FTP, or APIs, who sort of owns that. If something is not going smoothly with testing, who picks up the phone and calls the buyer to discuss that. Is it something that you want to have a full service partner like SPS handle, or would you rather own that? Companies do it successfully both ways. It's just kind of a easy way to think about it is, what do I want to own within my business? And then lastly, I always say, no matter how you're doing EDI, whether it's, through a more of a managed service partner, in-house with your own IT staff, or with SPS and, and trust with Encompass as sort of the full service option, there's 7 core components that always need to be taken into account. So you have the actual technology, where it's the hardware, the translator, whatever, to physically get set up and do that. It's that expertise of those different partners, understanding the design and configuration to get that into the system of record as well, or the ERP. Again, the connectivity and sort of understanding what those preferences are for each customer, going through that testing process, having the sort of proactive data and analysis available for like reporting, so you can actually figure out if an error does come up in the future, where is that error? What do we need to do to fix this and get this shipped? And then lastly, just ongoing support. So no matter how you're approaching it, those are sort of the 7 core building blocks that SPS really believes need to be accounted for. Tanya, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, having interacted with us a lot and
Yeah,
talked
of course
through
I have
that,
thoughts.
on plenty of calls before, but there's different ways to do it. That's kind of the things to think about.
Yeah, and some of just to expand a little bit on what you said, trading partners are changing their requirements all the time. And if you have a full service provider, they usually know that ahead of time. There was a few years ago when John Deere changed their ASN requirements, and they emailed all their providers and suppliers and all the things, but at least our customers didn't know it, or didn't get the email, or ignored the email, and that date came around, and the next day everybody's blew up because John Deere stopped accepting their ASNs. Where if you have someone like SPS or even with us, we're proactively watching for those. John Deere also emailed SPS, right? And SPS went, oh, hey, we know that. Great, we'll get all of our customers ready. And so when that June 21st date, I think it was, came, SPS customers did not land into that pickle. And John Deere in specific is very fine heavy. So people were getting fined all over the place because their ASNs weren't compliant. So using a provider that is going to be proactive and know that ahead of time and not reactive is huge, or can be huge.
Yep. I used to get a lot of those emails too, Tanya, when I was in more of a direct selling role. Customers would reach out and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm covered for this. Can you guys make this update for Walmart or whatever it is? And it was really nice to be able to tell them, yep, you're already taken care of. SPS did that, like a month ago for the 3,000, vendors were supporting there. So exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then another thing that it just popped into my brain as you were talking is, and I actually used this morning when I was talking to a customer, is all of the connections that are already built. Every time a new trading partner comes up and a new customer comes up, you don't want to be starting from fresh, right? We've got the maps already built for Target. Why are we building new maps for Target? Some providers, you are building a new map for every trading partner for every document, where SPS in particular already has all those built and all those relationships and all those testing. Sometimes you can even skip testing because SPS has already made an agreement with the end customer that whatever we send you will be fine. So there's some beauty in that. You have how many connections? There's so many connections, I don't even know, that are already built and already in use and already running smoothly. So that helps in speed too.
Yep. And I think it is over 4,000 different buying organizations now that are pre-wired in that network across, like you said, the John Deere's, the Cats, the specific, CPG retail, all across the board. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Great points. Both of you have touched on why a partnership is so important. And Brian, you mentioned outsourcing, and so that's where we're headed with our next question. Jason, for manufacturers without an in-house EDI expert, what are the key considerations when deciding whether to outsource their EDI operations? And are there any specific benefits for that outsourcing can offer?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. Key considerations, I would say, are things like volume of documents. So, do you have 100 trading partners, or do you have 1 or 2 trading partners? How often per day or per week are you required to send these documents to your trading partners? A lot of that are key considerations when you're looking at, can I service this need with the personnel I have internally, or do I need to get help, either look at some sort of solution like Entrust, or outsourcing some of the day-to-day operations with an advanced support arrangement with someone like my team. So I think those are some of the key considerations. Knowledge with internal knowledge of the system and whether or not they can handle the volume and the number of documents per trading partner and number of trading partners. So I think we've seen a whole bunch. We had one where they had like a handful of trading partners, but their volume was thousands per week, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So Tanya, do you got any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but we can help for a season, right? It's not like you sign up with us and we're just going to do your EDI forever. Now we can do that, of course.
Of course.
But right, we talked a little about staff augmentation, and we talked about busy seasons where we can just come in and help. And then we can spend some time training end users, especially if it's our EDI guy left. And we have no idea what we're doing. Can you please help? Sure. And we can teach your team when you rehire and replace that guy. We're more than willing to do whatever it takes to make you as a customer efficient and accurate and happy. So it's not just a sign up with us and you're done, or managed services on any level. We can do a lot of different pieces.
Great. And Tanya, you just touched on this, and Jason, you might have something to add, but we know that manufacturers have personnel with limited EDI experience, and training or education opportunities. What should they be considering to empower their teams effectively to manage the EDI process, especially during holiday periods?
Yeah, I think just starting with understanding EDI. There's a lot of information out on the internet, of course, but finding reliable sources can be challenging. So that's challenging in anything we do, right? Finding reliable sources. And just learning everything you can about EDI is the great place to start. How does EDI work? Some people can spell EDI, and that's about as far as it goes, right?
Yeah.
And then some people are a little more versed in it. And then pulling in specific to your ERP or your EDI provider, if you're using SPS fulfillment, they have great training tools. Just at being informed is always so helpful.
I would add that I would say teach the importance of EDI and how it impacts your business. For example, if you miss an ASN, the chargebacks that you might receive from a vendor or customer, those are important things to be communicating to people who are doing this, because not everybody understands that, and sometimes people there's no sense of urgency. And so I guess express to them, while you're working through it, that this is why EDI is important to our organization, and help them understand why they do the things they do.
Yeah, and even the people who you don't think it impacts need to understand EDI. We often have somebody change the shipping process and doesn't mention it to anybody who knows about EDI, and then it breaks. We always kind of jokingly call EDI the evil stepchild that gets ignored and thrown in the closet, right? Until something breaks, and then you pull them out and you're like, okay, how do we fix this? So just passing that knowledge throughout the organization to the key people who say, oh, hey, we're going to change where we put the tracking number in our ERP. And that somebody knows enough to say, that might impact EDI. We need to make sure the EDI people know. So that education throughout the organization is really important.
Great. Thank you, Tanya. Jason,
Sure to-
oh,
I was gonna say, actually, be sure to check out the SPS blog as well. A lot of great information there. Gotta plug that, right?
yeah.
Oh yeah, and our
Thank
blog
And-
too,
and-
right? We have lots
Yep.
of information on ours as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
thanks,
those
Brian.
are great plugs. Jason, you briefly mentioned this, but what are some advantages of using an EDI advanced support solution for manufacturers that lack the in-house expertise, and how can these services alleviate the burden of EDI management during high volume times?
Sure. Happy to talk about that. So the advanced support solutions that we offer basically will do staff augmentation for your company. If you don't have a full staff of EDI experts on at call, I guess, you can reach out to our team. We will take that and we will, become a part of your organization. We do offer an SLA. So during your peak seasons, if you need something to be turned around quickly, we'll part of the advanced support solution includes the turnaround time. And we're a team of experts. So we know what we're doing. We have a lot of customers that go through the same situations, and so we can act quickly and resolve your issues. So that's kind of the plug for the advanced support, and why it's important and what we do. And again, as we've mentioned, you can do it for a season. So you might need us for 3 months or 6 months, or you might come off and on as employees transition out, or you have new employees come on. We can kind of act and help and do a lot of that transition while you're ramping them up.
Great. You have touched on our next question. So if you have anything else to add, during the holiday season, unforeseen issues can arise. We know that. So how can manufacturers lacking in-house EDI expertise proactively plan for and manage unexpected challenges or disruptions that will affect their EDI processes?
But it's kind of have a plan. It's kind of generic, but I would say understand right now, because the holiday seasons are a month and a half away almost. I would say have a plan, but not only that, understand what executing that plan looks like. And those are things like, do I have enough personnel? What does that look like? Do I need to hire? Do I need to look at outsourcing for staff augmentation? The biggest thing I could say is have your procedures documented. If you are looking at either hiring temporary workers or even outsourcing to a company like Encompass, make sure you have your procedures in order, make sure they're up to date, make sure they are ready to go, because the last thing you want to be doing is scrambling when you bring in new people, and nobody understands that hey, this is what we're looking for when a reject comes in or when an order comes in. So make sure your procedures are up to date and ready to go, no matter which direction you choose.
Great.
And I just would like to plug on that. Sorry.
Sure.
That and I'm not bragging, but I'm bragging. Right, our team has some of the smartest people in the EDI industry, especially for the ERPs that we support. Right, we have hundreds of years across our people worth of experience if you add us all together. Right, we do have a very intelligent, well-versed, and experienced team.
Great. Thanks for that plug. That's a very humble brag. So
Yeah, Tanya, I felt good about my 10 years at SPS until I heard that.
Oh, that's funny. You just add to the number, right, Brian?
Yeah.
That just might mean we have retirement age people. I don't know. Could also mean that.
So we have an EDI solution. We've implemented it. Maybe we've outsourced it. We need support. Now let's go into measuring success. So Tanya, how can manufacturers measure the success of their EDI implementation, particularly in the context of Black Friday? Are there any key performance indicators or metrics that they should track?
Internally, absolutely. There may be external ones too, which I'm going to start with. Right, your suppliers, most of the time, not your suppliers, your customers have scorecards that they're keeping on you as you're their supplier. And that's a really easy one to to watch, right? You can see that either plummet or rise throughout the process. And that's a fairly easy one. Your employee productivity, right? We've freed them up from doing all of this order entry. Now they're being more productive in other areas. That's a pretty easy one to measure. Things we've talked about a million times already on this call, right? Our volumes increased. Did we keep up with that? Did we manage still to ship quickly? Did we still hit all of the marks that we promised our customers we will hit? Error tracking is another one, right? We only had 10 errors this week instead of the 100 we had last year. Of course, you're going to need to have tracked this last year to see improvement this year. But if you didn't, start tracking it this year so you can see your improvement next year. And then you can compare, over year. Did we see an increase in sales this year? What drove that? Did we handle it well? All of those kind of indicators. And you might even, we talked about this, or I talked about this before, cash flow. You might see your invoices paid quicker. So you've got some more cash to work with.
Brian, looking beyond Black Friday, how can manufacturers leverage their EDI infrastructure to enhance overall operational efficiency, customer satisfaction, and long-term growth?
Yeah, and one thing to add to what Tanya was talking on too, because just again from my experience at SPS, I think there's merit in observing like the gut check of how things just feel and how they went at the end of the season too. I think there's a lot of the time we'll have customers come to us or prospects that say, I'm not going through that again. I need to make a change for next year, and even if the data isn't there that can or can't show that, whatever it is, just knowing if EDI is being a bottleneck for sales, those people are going to be coming to the IT resources asking, what's going on. And sometimes I'm sure it shows up in the data, but sometimes it's just the gut check of how do you feel it went, this season. So yeah, I think there's something to think there too.
Really good point.
Yeah, and to speak to your question about kind of the, what can you do, to enhance that longer term. Again, my point earlier, where a lot of companies view EDI as a compliance requirement with their buyer. They look at it, they don't really want to do it. It can be a huge benefit when rolled out correctly across other parts of your business. So a huge area of opportunity that SPS has focused on the last few years is really diving into like the 3PL market, for example. So working with third-party warehouses where, maybe you do EDI with your buyers and, do POs and invoices, but you're logging into a 3PL portal, or you're forwarding your orders via email out to multiple different warehouses. And then they're emailing you back, and you lose a lot of the visibility across those different parties. So implementing, I think Tanya and I were talking about it last week, like the 900 series documents, for example, with EDI for communication with those 3PLs to gain that visibility and make things a lot more efficient can be a huge, catalyst to growth there as well. I think to that point, carrying it over to other parts of the business like marketplaces. A lot of companies, work with Amazon and just use the Vendor Central or the Seller Central platform and do things manually, not realizing, oh, I have, integrated EDI with Encompass today. Maybe I'll add Amazon onto that. It can be a quick and easy win that just does, some people don't realize that's an option because they already have a portal available to them. And I think lastly, from, the way SPS approaches it is, again, a lot of people think about EDI as what do I need to do to be compliant, just to get the check in the box on the scorecard. We've really been trying to drive more towards viewing it as, what do you need to do to get an A with your customer? Like that's the end goal, right? With the actual end customer, and then also the buying organization. What do I need to do to get an A with them? And typically it comes from providing additional detail, data, catalog images, all sorts of extra little, sort of EDI tangents that can help with that. In addition to just, providing more detail in the EDI rather than, using a basic portal. So I think viewing it as that, what can I do to get an A is maybe a little better than what can I do to get a check in the box, for a long-term view.
a great way to put it. What a great conversation. I hope you've all gained as much from this as I have. A big thank you to our panelists for generously sharing their wisdom. We'll go ahead and take some time for questions. Just a reminder, please be sure to type those in the question box located in your control panel. It looks like we've had a question come through. So this is open to anyone that would like to answer. At what point does it make sense to automate my EDI when I'm doing things manually today?
Yeah, I could jump on that one first. It's kind of a tough question because it's dependent on the business. I think I said earlier, we have customers where sometimes they're just getting, maybe as a company, they only sell 3 SKUs and, they get orders, a single line item, orders that are pretty easy to process. Sometimes, they have, I don't know, a hardware, distributor. So they might have tens of thousands of SKUs, and some of those orders might be significantly more manual. So it kind of depends on the time spent and what those orders look like. I think as a generic answer with SPS, we see people that are typically doing, around 100-ish orders a month. Ballpark is typically they're going to see a strong ROI for automating that. Irrelevant of what those orders look like. Is a pretty safe bet. And then the other side of that too is, if there's challenges that you're facing tied to doing things manually, whether it's resource, a team that maybe runs really lean, and that person that does that today could be better spent, reallocated to sales or something like that, is a big consideration, as well as what's the sort of the opportunity cost to doing it manually.
That's great.
I think that,
go ahead, Tanya.
Sorry. Also, I think volumes, it's easy to throw numbers out, but sometimes you may only have, 10 orders a week, but they're all 100 lines long. You have to consider it's maybe not a count of orders as much as start time in your employees. How long does it take to get some averages? How long does it take to enter an order? A 1-line dropship order is a whole different ballgame than a 100-line distribution center PO. So just consider that it's not an easy just count your orders kind of a situation. Consider
or chargebacks. Evaluate the cost of chargebacks. That's a big one too.
Absolutely.
It's like, some people choose not to do EDI. I'm like, well, I get dinged, $200 on every order because I don't want to do EDI. It's like, geez, you could have an EDI solution for a lot less than that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just a compliance tool, just to avoid that. So.
Those are great points. Next question. Do you actually see increase in supplier scorecards? It sounds good, but do you see it in real time?
It's a realistic question, right? I'll tell you for sure you see the dings in real time, right? When your scorecard goes down, you notice that right away because they're your trading partners are watching that. I definitely also hear people say, man, our scorecard went up and I didn't even really think about that was going to happen when we did EDI. So absolutely, I hear that on a regular basis, more regular than ever before. I think more and more as the world is changing, suppliers are tracking that. I think there was a time when no one tracked that, and that is not today's world anymore. So yes, we are absolutely seeing increases in your score on those scorecards.
That's great. It looks like we've covered all of our questions. Before we conclude, are there any final thoughts from our panelists? Jason, we'll start with you.
I would say, if you take a hard look internally at your team and you need to have some sort of staff augmentation for the holiday season, now is the time. Don't wait. Let's start those conversations. Let's get something put in place now so we can make sure that we are prepared for the upcoming holiday season. And I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Anyone else have any closing remarks?
Of course.
Yeah. Tanya, I'll let you go.
Okay. I was just going to say that EDI can sometimes be a bad word, and people just want to ignore it and make it go away. But at the end of the day, it's not. It's actually helpful, and it actually does improve your business, and it improves your processes, and improves all the things. Yes, it's a little painful in the implementation side. you got to do some real analyzing of your business and your data and your people, and then do some implementation. Those are always, there's some work involved there. But at the end of the day, you can see really fast results, improvements, and it is not as scary as a lot of people think it is.
Great. Thank you, Tanya. Brian?
Yeah, I think I'd echo largely what Jason had mentioned, in getting ahead of it if you can. I realize you can't always do that and stuff comes up quick last minute, but if there's stuff that's on the to-do list and you're aware of it, getting ahead of it now instead of trying to do it just in time before peak season, because SPS, we have close to, what is it, almost 50,000 customers actively using our service, and a lot of people like to procrastinate. So getting ahead of it can be great. And then the whole idea as well that it's not always just a one-to-one connection between customer and SPS or customer or user and Encompass. We have to account for the buying organization, potentially a 3PL, all these other parties that have a lot of priorities that pop up right at the end of the season here. So even if you have your ducks in a row, we're kind of codependent on each other to make it a success in time. So just to keep that in mind and jump on it sooner than later.
That's a great point. Thank you both. And there you have it, folks. I hope you leave here today feeling inspired and equipped to tackle Black Friday with confidence. Remember, this journey doesn't end here. Stay connected, keep learning, and let's make this Black Friday season 1 for the book. A special thank you once again to our host, Encompass Solutions. If you have any questions about our EDI solution, or you'd like to speak with SPS or one of our experts, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to take you to the next step in transforming your business. Thank you for being a part of this roundtable discussion. Until next time, keep innovating and keep smiling. Thank you.
Thanks.